Morning, everyone. Welcome to the DA Administrators Workshop today. Happy Friday. I hope that everyone is well and staying safe. My name is Abe Christ. It's nice to see everybody this morning. This session is being recorded and it will be posted to later in the week, or at least our best version of the DA workshop will be posted early next week. If you either missed this or you need to pass this on to a colleague. A PDF of this presentation has been uploaded into the chat already, and it will be also posted later or early next week, as well as the PowerPoint. If you can't find it, sometimes you have to scroll up in Teams to find it. If you're not experienced with Teams, but we promise it has been uploaded. I saw it in there. Like last year, we have split the trainings into two sessions. We have our general training for test administration now, and then another one on special populations that is today at noon. You can register using our website if you'd like to attend. This presentation contains a bunch of new tidbits of info and reminders of critical pieces of information. You will also see that many of the procedures remain the same, so rest easy. We will get through this just fine. We have 90 minutes, but we likely, based on our last two workshops earlier this week, we will finish probably a couple minutes earlier. You never know, though, if we get a spirited group of questions, but we do have 90 minutes. I already saw some hands raised. There will be several opportunities to ask questions during the meeting. If you have questions, you can raise your hand at that time when we have the slide up. We'd love to hear from you. We will unmute your mic and you can ask your question. You can also chat your question. I know my colleagues are going to be looking at the chat, trying to do their best to keep up with questions. So you can also chat in if you have questions. One thing, and one other thing too, if you have any technical difficulties with Teams, I know we've had a couple things this week. I think on the user side, you might want to try switching your device. If you really have a hard time in the meeting invite, you can also just call in if your actual Teams viewer is not working. And so we ask that you try to be diligent about problem solving on your end if you have issues. So last thing is, if you are a new coordinator, we ask that you raise your hand today. You will make it through this. We've all been new at one point or another, and I see some hands going up. You guys are brave folks stepping up as DAs in your district. We'll get a count and report back in a few minutes. Okay, so who's on the call today? As I mentioned, my name is Abe Christ. I'm also joined by a bunch of my awesome colleagues, Jeff Gregg, who's out there, who works on our science and CTAS assessment. I'm also joined by Deirdre Ducharme and Janet Stuck, who work on special populations. One thing to note, and congratulations are in order, Janet Stuck will be retiring on April 1st, and that's not an April Fool's joke. Janet is stepping off the stage for next chapter in life, and so Janet, congrats. We just mentioned it that if you start emailing Janet on April 2nd, you might not get a response. So just be aware of that. Congrats again, Janet, and we'll hear from Janet later in the program. Also on the call, Christy Alvarino, who works on Smarter Balanced, interims, handles all our appeals. If you have questions about appeals, you probably want to go to Christy. Her email and number is here. I know Michelle Rosado is also on the call today. Michelle is our SAT school day program manager, among other things, and she handles everything SAT. So if you have questions about SAT, this workshop is not about SAT, but I know if things come up, she's monitoring the chat. She'll chime in. And then lastly, Miriam Flores. I don't know if Miriam's on the call today, but if any of you know or knew Marlene Shamroy, Marlene also retired last year in September and has moved on. Congrats to Marlene, but Miriam Flores is pinch hitting for us in the office. So if you call our office, you'll probably be talking, or you call the 6860, you will likely be talking to Miriam. So we're, as I mentioned, actually I didn't mention this, but our office is housed in the performance office. Here's a great snapshot of our office. There are many, many team members who contribute to the success of our program, our assessment program, that are not necessarily on the call today. Our colleagues who work on our assessment data, there's a ton of data to process, our EdSite team and our psychometric team, also all on this snapshot. Please note, we have continued to slim down in the past year. There are several colleagues who have left since last year's in administration, and we're going to lose some more in addition to Janet before April 1st. So just be aware of that if you're emailing us or trying to contact our office, that we are losing a few more colleagues before June 30th of this year. Our favorite slide of the deck, it's our extended family. I guess it's become a tradition in our office that we share our pets and our family here. These are several of our members. We have Stella in the Viking costume, Maggie with the snow, Ruthie on the top of her house, Chloe wondering when the warm weather is coming, and some of our cats too. So feel free to email your favorite pets, and they might make a guest appearance in future presentations. We got some yesterday. Also joining us here today, our awesome CAI team, our program director, Jen Cho, is on the call. Erica Gray, who's a senior program manager, Marie Musumeci, program coordinator, and Kim David, project coordinator. Their contact information is here. We will be hearing from Jen later in the presentation about the CIAA section. Okay, if you're a new coordinator, we said this yesterday, the day before, this is probably one of the most important slides because these numbers and emails are your friends. If you have test administration or technology questions, you want to reach out, you can reach out to this number or this email address. If you have really more policy, or not procedure or technology, but policy related questions, contact us. Accommodations questions, contact us, and then security issues, contact us. You have our 6860 number, our CT student assessment at ct.gov inbox, which is monitored closely, Christie's email and my email if you have questions. Again, put this one on the side of your cube or wherever is highly visible. So what's in store for the presentation? We're going to have an overview of the assessments, then we're going to touch on improprieties, irregularities, and breaches, the appeal system, and then CAI is going to jump in for the more sort of system side. Okay, so assessment and accountability. Let's talk for a few minutes about that. So first off, the number one thing is, again, whether you're new, veteran, whatever the case may be, we said this last year, the health and safety of students, staff, and community is the most important variable when considering our state assessments. Really, testing takes a backseat to the safety of everyone in your community, in your schools, and we're not here to that is the most important thing. With that said, CSDE is still asking for universal participation, much like last year. There is no waiver this year, so standard reporting will return. The waiver changed the way we did reporting last year, but will not this year at this point. We will not be offering remote testing options for any students. I'll repeat that again. We will not be offering any remote testing options for any students. I say this twice just because we started loss testing a few weeks ago in early January, and districts still think, or we're getting questions periodically, that there is remote testing. There is no remote testing this year for Smarter NGSS. There never was for ALTS. And as a reminder, if you're a loss coordinator, you're in charge of loss testing in your district. Again, no remote testing there either. Getting some bonus tidbits today. Who needs to be tested? This pretty much remains the same. So students in private approved facilities, students in PSIS who attend out-of-state facilities or in-state non-approved facilities. We have a handout for that you can link off this slide deck. students with disabilities and or EL students. And then the one that's a little bit different is students in fully remote learning models. We'll touch on that in a couple minutes. Okay, what also remains the same? The TIDE system is still being provisioned as students as a student management system. Uploads will come from PSIS every night like in the past. This is the truth. I got an email Wednesday morning right before our first workshop. Someone was asking, hey, how do I add students into TIDE? Don't add students directly into TIDE. Again, it comes through PSIS. If your PSIS reg is correct, TIDE will be reflected exactly like that. We will be providing manuals as in the past. We haven't gone 110% digital, so look out for manuals by the end of this month. There will be one manual provided for approximately every 30 students for Smarter and NGSS. Again, one manual for every 30 for Smarter and NGSS, 2 manuals per school for CTAA, and 1 coordinator manual for the district. If you need anything more, contact one of us, the CAI help desk. We love to help you, but you will be receiving that before the end of the month. We will be doing office hours once again. We've done office hours for many years. On February 17th and March 17th, there are 2 geared towards special populations. They're really based on really what's evolving at that point, and we're here to support you if you have questions. And then beginning on March 31st and at 3 o'clock and running through the end of testing every Thursday, we will be doing our regular office hours. So if you're new and you're sort of anxious about the window and you want to show up, and really the full team is always there if you have questions, and it's a pretty low key. We give you some updates and allow you to ask really whatever you need to ask as it relates to testing. And we can take other questions too. We'll do our best to answer them. And then finally, you will be ordering paper materials in TIDE for if you have Braille and large print students. Jen will be touching on this in her presentation in a few minutes. Okay, so what's new in 2022? And we've already touched on some things already, you know, like the no remote proctoring, that kind of thing. So some of these things kind of fall on both sides of the fence, but here are some real what's news. Our special pops training this year, we did this last year actually, but for many years we put these 2 trainings together. Again, we're doing a special focus special pops section. There's really only one left. There is only one left today at noon. If you haven't registered, there's plenty of space left. Go in on our website, register if you're concerned and you have some questions about special pops. Dee and Janet will be hosting that presentation. Secure browser, that's new this year. I'm gonna leave it to the experts. Jen's gonna cover that in a few minutes on her section. So we'll wait for Jen, but mind you that the secure browser is new this year. Results delivery for assessments. We are back to our standard reporting. We will very likely be out with results in June. Like we have strived to for many years now. Mid-June we're looking, and then we'll conduct public reporting sometime later in the year, barring the unforeseen. And as I mentioned earlier, there is no waiver in place this year, so in terms of an accountability aspect, those trains will be running as they were running for many years prior. One thing about our test results, this is kind of what's new, but it's kind of what's old too, but what's new in 2021, when we released our results, we still get questions about, hey, were there results for 2021? Where are they? We made the decision not to put them on EdSite just because of the significant, difference in circumstances last year. You all know why. We won't get into that. But we have a page dedicated to the 2021 results. And they're really interesting. We report out on such things as learning model and testing location. If you're a data person, you haven't seen this page yet, it's a terrific page to take a look at. I think one of my colleagues dropped it in the chat. Yes, I'm getting a thumbs up. It's in there somewhere. Thank you. This is another one, field testing for Smarter Balanced. This is new this year. We will be field testing on the CAT for ELA and math. On the CAT for ELA and math. No field testing for the performance task in math. The math performance task is still being delivered, but there will be no field test items on that section. For many years and for a variety of reasons, Connecticut students have not had the opportunity to what I'd like to say, vote on the items through field testing. Now our students will be able to do that. And there will be a few items per test sprinkled in. Rest easy. There's only about 1 to 2 math items in the CAT and at max 3 to 6 ELA items to help build the smarter balanced pool. The result will be a few more minutes of testing, but we're anticipating the impact will be minimal. And this is not just through our guesstimates. Other states have been field testing for many years, and so we have data to back that up. Keep in mind, too, that the tests are technically untimed, so this should not cause a problem in terms of students accessing the live items. And then also field testing is a very common practice that was done for many years for CMT when we really used to develop our own summative assessments, and now is actually done on our science assessment. So this isn't like a new thing in Connecticut. So I think I might have advanced that too fast. The comprehensive portal, our comprehensive portal has been updated. I'm not going to spend, I'm not going to demo it. So if you're either new, get used to the comprehensive portal. That's your friend. And if you're a veteran, take a look at it. It's been sort of reconfigured to update things. And then as far as our student assessment news, again, if you're a new coordinator, this is the pipeline for information. We do our best to include as much new info. We understand sometimes you get it and it's like this mega blast of info. I think in most cases, most people aren't overseeing every single aspect in the student assessment news, but there's a real good mix of information that comes through the student assessment news. And typically the pace of the distribution will increase through testing just because we use that as our primary information distribution tool. The thing about it we wanted to mention is we moved to a listserv this year. So we took all original folks who received the student assessment news, pushed them up to a listserv. If you are not receiving it now, please send an email to ctstudentassessment@ct.gov and join the fun. You'll get every version.
The link is in the chat.
Okay, thank you, Christy. Okay, so not to belabor this point, but seeing that this has been an issue, we actually made it slide just for this purpose. There is no remote proctoring option for summative testing, as I've said a few times. So Smarter Balanced, NGSS, CTAS, and CTAA should all be administered in a school environment. I did mention earlier, well, how about those remote learning model students? It is recommended to schedule a student one-on-one in person at a school or a designated district location if you have situations like that. Again, as I mentioned before, in these cases in particular, health and safety of students, staff, and the community is the #1 priority here. So if this is somehow going to tangle with that, we do not want to get in the way of that. However, if it's possible to safely bring the student in for one-on-one testing, that is a recommendation. Okay, these are pretty straightforward slides. Again, 17th of March and February, we're having our office hours on special pops. Deirdre and Janet will have some like late breaking information, and all of us will be available for any questions. And then beginning March 31st, we will be doing our office hours every Thursday at 3 p.m. Links are in the student assessment news if you want to join the party. Our assessment calendar, here's the assessment calendar for this year. I'm not going to spend any time here. There's no surprises here. The one thing that is sort of a surprise, but shouldn't be too much of a surprise, is we are delivering SAT digitally now. So keep in mind, if you have any responsibilities as far as SAT goes, you might want to get caught up with any trainings that have been going on for SAT. Michelle Rosado and the SAT team has done a lot of trainings prior to the new year, and I know there's more on tap. I think she's sending out a communication very soon about upcoming training. One thing to mention, I'm going to sort of jump the gun here on this one, is just in case I forget it, is we're going to talk a little bit about TIDE here today. We talk about the PSIS, the TIDE upload. SAT is using TIDE, but it's really a different flavor of TIDE for them. So again, we're not going to go down the road and say, okay, these are the 10 differences. But my message to you would be, if you are at all responsible for SAT testing, that you almost treat that as a separate version of TIDE. And so just don't assume that what you learned today is the same thing for SAT. Okay, well, look at that, TIDE PSIS data sync. Who would have thought? So we're going to touch on this as it relates to Smarter Balanced and our alternate assessments and science. So district administrators need to continue to work with your PSIS coordinators to ensure accurate student information is reported in the PSIS registration module and TIDE. Again, during the window, changes in PSIS reg are automatically pushed into TIDE by the following day. It's that quick. So if you work with your colleagues in district, some of you might be the actual PSIS folks, that change will come to fruition the next day in TIDE. Some big ticket items as far as the sync goes. You should know that all the testing demographics were pulled based on what was in the October 1 collection, essentially the free zero that occurred in November of 2021. So if you're wondering, hey, well, where did you get all this information from? It was originally populated from free zero in November. Keep in mind that the values for recently arrived EL students and Section 504 students were not pulled from free zero. These must be set in the registration module. If this doesn't make sense with you, I would, as I mentioned in that first slide, you really need to coordinate with your PSIS folks in district. And then another big day is is on June 3rd. When we will be snapshotting everything that's in PSIS reg. So if you have changes that you need to be made, you need to do that by June 3rd. And you might be wondering, well, what's special about June 3rd? Well, that's the last day of the testing window. Couple sort of unique but questions that come up every year. Students who are repeaters should be tested. So those students are in TIDE. If you don't, for instance, if a student is back in 4th grade for another year, if you don't test that student, they're not going to be counted as a participant. The student's grade in PSIS is the grade in which the test is given. So, if you have a student in 7th grade, but you have him or her identified in grade 6 in PSIS, guess what grade they're going to get. So make sure that is correct. And then for those of you that are overseeing science in high school, we call these guys the grade 11 skippers, students who magically kind of move on from grade 10 to 12 and due to credits and so forth. We know this stuff happens. This is one of these situations. We don't ask that those students are caught up to be tested. So the skippers, you're just going to let them continue in grade 12. We're not testing those students. Okay, this is a snapshot of a slide. If students' status changes, if you have any, please refer to this. We could spend a lot of time here discussing each of these, but again, any status changes during the window, you would rely and lean on this slide here. It's actually a great resource. Okay, I think I've hit the point where I'm going to pass the baton to Janet Stuck, and Janet's going to carry us through the next few slides. Janet?
Thank you. Good morning. I wanted to share with you my appreciation for all of your work over the years and appreciate all of your efforts, and I will miss you. So in terms of our assessment, the TIDE designated supports and accommodations are virtually unchanged from last year. I wanted to share with you at the very top here, we have access to an accessibility chart, which is an excellent tool for you to share with your PPT teams and your teachers so that they can look and see what is actually available for students within the testing program. If you attend the special POPs presentation, we go into more depth about these things. We also encourage you to have your students practice accessing the assessment through the practice tests, including the accommodations and supports, so that they're more familiar with them within the testing environment. We also have a feature called the Special Documented Accommodations, which are those supports for students above and beyond what is allowable in the typical assessment. So these are petitioned by the DA, so that you would contact either Deidre or myself for these that are designated as special documented accommodations to allow those to be approved for the student. And again, your gold resource for these are related to the assessment guidelines, which are available on the portal. I strongly encourage you to look at these. We update these every year to make them as clear as possible for your reference. Next slide, please. In terms of your students who are considered alternate assessment students, these are students who meet eligibility criteria to participate in an alternate assessment. They will be identified as IDEA, and they will have significant cognitive disabilities. So these students do not participate in any of our other standard assessments. They participate in either, in most cases, in all cases, the CTAA for English Language Arts and Math, and then in grades 5, 8, and 11, they would participate in the CTAS for science. And in order to indicate these students as different from the standard, their trained teacher would submit the alternate assessment eligibility form into the data entry interface. And once these are submitted, these students are flagged with an indicator in their demographic area so that you can ensure that they are accessing the correct test. Next slide, please. So these are some critical dates related to the alternate assessment eligibility form. At the beginning of the year, the training for these teachers became available in the September. The training is required every year for teachers who will be administering the alternate assessment to any student. The training is still available, and if students, we know that PPTs happen all year long and these decisions are made. So as soon as that decision is made, any teacher who would be administering should access the training so that they can submit the alternate assessment eligibility form. The first window was November 19th through December 22nd, and we created this window to ensure that students in grade 11 and those students that are duly identified, such as English learners and special education students, can be rostered for the appropriate tests such as SAT, science, and the lost links, so that they are not accidentally tested on the standard test. If you miss the December 22nd window, you need to continue to have teachers trained and submit the form, but it will be up to you to make sure and be extra diligent to ensure that these students are not tested on the standard assessment in any of these assessment programs. So at this point, since it's after December 22nd, please continue to submit the forms so that your students can access the correct test. And March 1st is the deadline for all students. And we want to make sure that that assessment flag is indicated. If you miss the deadline, you make sure that you call the CAI help desk so that they can indicate the student for the alternate assessment. Next slide, please.
Yeah, question. Thank you, Jean. So this is the point there's someone might be on mute there. Just getting a reboot. If this is the point where we take questions for a few minutes. I know my colleagues have been handling the question chat. You can either fire a question off into the chat, or if you'd like to use the raise hand feature now would be the time to do that. So I'm going to wait a couple seconds, and if you'd like to ask something, feel free to do that. There will be other opportunities too, so don't. Janet, I think this is in reference to the form. How do we submit that form again? Janet or Deirdre?
So I encourage you to attend our special populations session, which has more details, but essentially we have resources on the CAI portal to walk you through that process. There's one particularly created for the district administrator for testing as an overview. The trained teacher, meaning the teacher who has participated in all 4 modules of the alternate assessment training and then passed the associated quiz, will be certified as a trained TEA, and they will submit the alternate assessment eligibility form, which has been essentially completed at the PPT, into the data entry interface, which is on the CAI portal, which would register the student for the alternate assessment. As a DA, it's important that you create a TEA user role for any of your teachers who will be involved in the alternate assessment. The TEA role is essentially exactly the same thing as the TE role, the same as your teachers, but it also provides additional support for accessing all permissions related to the alternate assessment and access to the secure materials for the alternate assessment.
Thank you, Jen. So I see a couple questions coming in, but I know that they've been answered, I believe, by my colleagues. So we should be okay on that. A couple things. Well, let me see a couple things. PSIS. We are the note. I don't want to get too far down the road of PSIS, but essentially, as long as your students are in PSIS Reg, we will be borrowing from that. And that, if you're not familiar with that language, your colleagues will know what that means. Again, if a student is PSIS Reg, they're new, they're going to get pulled up to the tide the next night. Where can we access a list of PSIS contacts? I know we have a contact list. If I'm agile enough, I will try to drop that in the chat when I'm not presenting. Erica, I see you asked that question. If I don't get to it, please check in with me after the presentation. I promise to get that to you. Okay, seeing no others, I'm gonna just move on here. So next, again, we'll have 2 more opportunities for questions. We have sort of a middle point and then one at the end. So if you're anxious to ask questions, you still have plenty of time. Okay, so test security. These protocols really remain the same. So if you've been in the business of administering tests for the last few years, this isn't new information. However, we are obligated to really just cover this again every year, not only as a reminder, but also just for new coordinators, just to kind of reorient yourself to this kind of stuff. So what is a breach of test security? Here's a list of items. Again, this is not a comprehensive list, but this represents most of the bulk of the issues that would happen. So analyzing and copying test items, that's a no-no. Coaching students, that's a big no-no in any way. Giving students answers or changing answers, that is not appropriate. Allowing students digital access. Cell phones are not allowed in the testing room, so please do not allow that. and then any unauthorized login to the test delivery system is not allowed. This doesn't represent the whole world of possibilities, but these are the biggies. We do have in our test coordinator manual in Appendix G a list of most of the things that could happen in the world of online testing. I'm sure there's some that haven't been thought of, but they are chunked together by the 3 levels of security. So if you're anxious to kind of see what else could be happening in terms of issues, they are there as well. But I'm sure, as most of you as experienced test administrators, you already have a sense of this, but please take a look at that list. It's very helpful. Okay, so this is the same slide we show every single year. Please note this wording in TAMS and share it with your colleagues. It's really, it outlines sort of the importance of test security and some of the ramifications. The reason it's back again this year, it's been in our slide deck for many years, because we just recognize more than ever that there are many things on the minds of educators. I know there's so many things going on these days, so it's just a reminder. Please reorient your colleagues to the importance of preserving test security by having the team members, might want to just spend a minute reading this and checking this guidance out. It's taken from our test security box in our test administration and coordinator manuals. This is about our TA security confirmation page. We've been torn for years about training and how we train our educators, but for when it comes to regular summative testing, I'm not talking about our alternate testing, and we don't want to require an online training. We don't want to ask educators, especially now, to do one more thing. However, what we do ask is at the beginning of every TA login, you have this confirmation screen that makes TAs aware of the security measures. This will appear again this year. And every time you go in to log into a test, you're going to be greeted with this nice wording. You're going to have to click OK to advance through it, but it's really a way for us to say, hey, are you aware of these things in the test administration manual? State policy regarding participation hasn't changed. Again, there is no waiver in place this year, so nothing has changed in that regard. We're still driven by our state statutes, Connecticut General Statutes 10-14N. Here is the actual statutes. We are aware, we are aware that there is occasional pushback in the districts. We know this really started and gained some velocity back in, with the adoption of Smarter Balance in 14-15. We've seen it diminish. We've kind of the ebb and flow, and we know it's in the districts, and this language can be used to communicate with any students or families regarding the importance of participation. If you have any issues with this, we certainly. We're very experienced at handling these cases, so give us a call. We can walk you through some sticky situations. Okay, on to improprieties, irregularities, and breaches. These are the 3 levels of security issues. We'll talk a little bit about each one, what you might need to do. Rest easy, because with the appeal system, we can really fix any situation. Well, most any situation. Okay, so what is a breach? What is an irregularity? What is an impropriety? A breach is a situation where there's a security incident that poses a threat to the test itself. So the actual test, something has happened where the test security is a concern. So my most favorite example is a student takes a snapshot, posts it on social media. A student takes a snapshot of an item and circulates it to his or her friends in a text message. That's an issue with potentially, the whole state with the security of the test. That's a breach. An irregularity is more of it's a heightened issue, but it involves really a group of students. A small group of students might be at a school, might be in a classroom, might affect the test security or the test validity. And finally, an impropriety. This is a low impact on an individual or a group of students who are testing, and there's really no risk of affecting any student performance or test security or test validity. So we know this stuff happens. What do you do if it happens? Again, if you're new, first thing is don't panic. We'll fix this. We've all been in this office for many years. We've seen just about every possible occurrence. We'll solve it together if you need a hand. If it's a breach situation, give us a call or contact us immediately. 6860 CT student assessment at ct.gov. Email any of us on the team. If you have more familiarity, maybe you're used to coordinating with Janet on a regular basis or whomever in the office, give us a call, let us know immediately. We'll walk you through what to do. If it's an irregularity, the incident can be really handled by the appeal systems, which we're going to talk about in 1 second. That should be addressed by the end of the day. And then finally, an impropriety. The incident really can be corrected at the local level and contained there. And if you need an appeal, you can do that yourself. Again, Appendix G in your test coordinator's manual is your friend in the sense that it outlines most of the possible occurrences and which level they would fall under. This is just a little bit more of a succinct way of saying what we said on the previous slide. What happens in each of these instances? Again, don't panic. Do your best to collect some information, and if you have any questions, contact us. Okay, so as I said before, if anything happens, it can really all be fixed by our appeal system or by CAI's appeal system. And actually, I'm going to pause for 1 second just about this is my one example of why TIDE is different for SAT and this whole system. The SAT does not use the appeal system. So just one instance, this is one of many where TIDE is different. But so let's go down the road now of what happens if you need to file an appeal for Smarter, NGSS, or ALTS. So this is how you would handle, there's the 6 types of appeals. You're going to end up using probably reopens and grace period extensions the majority of the time. Those allow students back into the test session in a case where the test has either been expired or submitted or a student that has walked away from the test and they need to get back into the test because they didn't have a chance to check their items. So I like to give the example of a student is picked up by their parents to go to a doctor's appointment. They don't have a chance to like check their work on items 1 through 15. Perfect example of a grace period extension. So again, those 2 middle ones are the most popular. You might have an instance where you use restore or invalidate or reset a test. Those are more on an isolated basis, but there's descriptions here. We're not going to talk about every single one. You can look in the test coordinator's manual to see a little bit when you would use these particular appeal types. Okay, tips on entering appeals. 3 things. Pretty straightforward. Please be careful when you're entering them. Make sure you're trained. Make sure you understand the appeal that you're submitting, what it means, what you're asking for. We review every single appeal that comes through. So if you think it's just going into the web and there'll be an automatic approval, we actually take a look at every single one. Christy looks at 99.9% of them and does a nice job reviewing them, considering what's happening and either granting or denying them. There is an option in that system to enter information, and sometimes folks don't put much in there, but more information is better. Tell us a story. Tell us about your day. Tell us about what exactly happened. We want to know. More is better in this case. I mean, we don't want a 10,000 word description of what happened, but I think you know what I mean. We want to hear what happened so we can judge whether or not it's okay to grant the appeal. Second thing is be mindful about reopening or grace period extensions, when to use them. We are more than open to allowing students for any when in need to get back into the test. That is an absolute, there's no discussion about that. We will grant all of those situations. The reason we mention this is we've noticed a pattern over the years. Usually it happens in pockets in particular schools or districts where the thinking is the more time on the test, the better. So students are either close to being done or done, the test is expired and they're allowed to go back in, you know, once or twice. Okay, we're probably gonna just wave you through. But when we see a pattern of 3 or 4 grace period extensions on a student, we start scratching our heads and saying, well, there's something not right here. So just be careful if you're working with your colleagues in district, that this is shouldn't be handed out without some consideration. If it's a legitimate, hey, the student didn't have a chance to get back and finish their test and review their items, that's no doubt granted. But it's just really when it's really bordering on, you know, hours of testing, something is not right. And then if you don't know what to do, call us. I'm not going to belabor all these contact information. Let us know. We'd love to help you out. And then finally, in terms of an accommodation issue for an appeal, we will likely ask you to correspond with a letter to our office, faxing the letter that includes this information for any accommodations issue. Just we have this process to document things. I think this has come as a surprise in years past, and we ask that you, again, it doesn't have to be a massive letter and description, but just a quick letter to us documenting what happened and submit it to us, to our office. We would really appreciate it. So just be aware that this will likely happen if you have accommodation issues. Okay, this is part 2 of our question area. I think, again, my colleagues have been knocking out the questions I see in the chat, so I don't think we have any there. I did see a couple. I know there's a reference to the TIDE guide in there, so that's a great resource. And then I saw Michelle dropped in. I think I forgot who it was earlier. Asked about the PSIS contacts. Michelle dropped that in this, so that's in there. Thank you guys for helping out. Are there any raised hands out there that want to ask a question? Is there a date set when SAT TIDE will be available? I'll leave that to Michelle. I think I have a general idea. There you go, February 7th. Thank you. Okay, I guess we're doing a decent job today. If you do have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. And I'm going to pass the baton now to Jen Cho, from our program director from CAI. Jen.
Thanks, Abe. So I will go over the CAI systems. The good news is that we haven't made any major updates that will require training from either for your students or your teachers. Everything pretty much remains the same. And like Abe said earlier, we're not supporting remote testing for summative assessments. So during the spring administration, hopefully things like SAD clouds and all those kinds of remote issues some of you may have experienced last year will just not even be relevant this year. So we'll start with the first system, the portal. Next slide. As Abe mentioned earlier, the portal did go through a redesign in June. So when you go there, you'll see that everything kind of looks a little bit different, but the functionality is still the same. There is still a card by each assessment type, and within the assessment card, you can still access all the CAI systems. In addition, we kind of changed how resources are laid out and how the search button works. So if you haven't had time to look at the portal, please do so. Because it's a new system, and what we do with all our systems is we welcome feedback. So if there's something that's not working for you, or you wish the portal would do something else, please let the help desk know, or let CSDE know. We'll be happy to take the feedback into consideration to further enhance our systems. Next slide. Okay, as mentioned, with the secure browser, like every year, we did launch a new browser in August of 2021. So if you have not updated the secure browsers on your devices from 2020 to 2021 to 2021 to 2022, please do so. Every year we do launch new desktop browsers. If you're using a Chromebook or an iPad, the app, if it was updated, should just automatically be updated on those tablets. If you are doing interim testing right now and you're using the secure browser, then you do have the latest and greatest and there's nothing else that you need to do. But if you aren't taking interim assessments, have not used the secure browser, please verify that you do have the current browsers installed on the devices. As a reminder, the summative assessments such as NGSS, Smarter Balance, and CTAA all require the secure browser in order to assess or access the assessments. Next slide. I always want to give a slide on Chrome just because Chromebook is a very popular device used in the Connecticut schools. Currently, we do support versions 91 to 96. Supporting version 97 is imminent, but not ready at the moment. We do ask prior to the start of the summative assessments that you do lock down that version. So if you're already locked down on 91, great. If you're on 97, you should probably lock it down on that version. We ask that you not, the reason why we ask you to lock it down is it's best not to have an update on the Chrome version in the middle of testing. While it doesn't happen often, we have seen issues with the newest versions that come out, and we do work with Google to get those resolved, but we want to make sure that there isn't any kind of disruption with testing. However, if you do roll over to a newer version of Chrome and we haven't supported it, we will allow you to still test with that. In addition to just the Chrome versions, we do also want to make sure that you're mindful of Google's end-of-life policy with their Chromebooks. And there's a link at the bottom of this slide that will give you access to all the Chromebooks out there, as well as when Google is going to end support for it. And this is important because you just want to make sure that there isn't a device that's so old that we can no longer support it. I do know that many districts have various versions of the Chromebook, so they rotate some newer ones in as they retire some old ones. So just make sure your tech coordinator is aware of the end-of-life policy for the Chromebooks. Next slide. Okay, before I move on to accessing the systems, does the updated browser have a number so that we can check to see if our computer is updated? I believe there is a version out there for the desktop, so we can get that in the Q&A. There is a version that you can definitely check to make sure you have the right one. However, one of the easiest things is just to launch it and see if you can even access it. That's another way of knowing if you have the latest version. In order to access any of our systems, you do need to have an account created in Tide. If you already had an account from previous years, we already rolled over all those accounts and reset the password for security purposes. Also, this was implemented a couple years ago, but if it's your first time logging into a new browser or a new device, we will send you a security code for you to also put in as well. This is just to make sure that we're validating the user. It's one of the requirements we need to maintain our security certifications. So just a one-time fee. If you see it happening more than once and often enough, please contact the help desk so we can figure out why you're seeing it more than once. Next slide. Okay, one of the main systems that we are using is the Test Information Distribution Engine, and this system is probably accessed by all users just based on all the different features that the system has to offer. So the features that it does have to offer is add or manage user accounts, review the student demographic and student settings in Tide, creating appeals, what Abe was talking about before, creating rosters for reporting purposes, and being able to order materials and run participation reports. So while Tide isn't the system to actually administer a test, it is kind of an administration system where all users usually need to have access to in order to verify some kind of information or to be able to run participation reports. All these features are documented in the Tide user guide. So if you need more information about a particular feature, it would be there. We also created quick guides. So we have a quick guide on how to create a roster or how to access participation reports. So if you don't want to review a big manual, you can also look at the quick guides as well. And I'm going to just focus on a couple features in Tide. So next slide. So like I kind of mentioned before, the provisioning of students and users happen in Tide. if a student needs to take any of the Connecticut summative assessments, they need to be in TIDE. So if you don't see the student in TIDE, then you need to check PSIS to make sure that all that information is there. I mentioned this in the chat, but PSIS and TIDE routinely sync up on a daily basis at 3 a.m. every day. So if you do make a change, let's say today in TIDE, it should be reflected tomorrow. But one of the things you do want to confirm is that all your students are in the system in order for them to be able to access an assessment. If you have a teacher or a proctor who needs to be able to proctor and start a session for the summative assessment, they also need to be in TIDE as well. So TIDE's really instrumental in making sure that your user has an account as well as the students are there to be able to take a test. Next slide. I'm going to also talk about the participation reports. These reports are going to be very useful during the test administration window. It will allow you to track the participations of your school and students and make sure that they're testing and that they're completing the test before the window ends. So there are 4 different types of participation reports: plan managed testing, test status code report, test completion rates, and test session status report. And I'm going to go through in detail the test status code report and the test completion rates. But the first one and the last one are also helpful as well. The plan and manage testing is a very granular kind of tool. So if you want to know what students tested on this day and had the test as completed, that report will allow you to drill down into whatever details you were interested in looking at. The test session status report is actually a real-time report. If you want to know within your schools who is actually testing at that given moment, that's the report that you can run. Next slide. So I'm going to go a little bit more into the test status code report. This is not a new report, but it's a very important report. And I have heard from many district users that this is the one report that they use. And the reason why it's so powerful is that it allows a district to be able to run one report, one Excel spreadsheet of every student in their district eligible for that given assessment. So if you ran a report for your district for Smart Balance Assessment, you will see a record for every test a student is eligible for. So for Smart Balance, a student is typically eligible for 3 tests, 1 ELA test, 2 math tests. And so you would see that student on the report 3 times, which each of the tests, and whether or not they've completed it, they started it, they've paused it. So it's really a great way of just kind of seeing getting a report for every student in your district, and then you can run different Excel filters to drill down to see who has not yet tested. Next slide. Okay. The test completion rate is actually a high-level aggregate report. It gives you a completion rate in the percentages of how your schools are doing. So in the beginning of a summative window, when you run this report, you may see schools with a test completion rate of 5%, 10%, and that's okay because they just start testing. But as the testing window comes to an end, the last 2 weeks, you want to see those rates go up to 80%, ultimately 95%, 100%. And this is a good way just to kind of see where your schools are in terms of progressing through the tests. If I was a district administrator, I would actually use both the test completion rates and the test status code report. Test completion rates allows me to see which schools are actively testing and which schools may be a little bit behind and where I have to call them and ask and make sure that they do know that testing needs to be completed. And let's say you have a school that's 80% complete. A test status code report would then allow you to see which specific students still need to test. So as a district administrator, I would encourage you to run both reports throughout the administration window. From the state side and from CAI, we actually do run them as well. And if we see that your participation rates are low in the last month, couple weeks before testing window ends, you will be getting a call from us too. Next slide. Okay, that was the end of TIDE. I'm going to talk a little bit about some updates to the test delivery system. There are 2 parts to this: the student interface, the side that the student sees, as well as the TA interface, which the test administrator sees. This is actually going to be covered a little bit more in the special populations presentation at noon, but we do offer an embedded speech to text. We started offering this last year. It is an embedded tool that CTAA created that is available on all devices that we support. There is no additional software you need to download or anything like that. It is just with the tool, and you must set this for a student in Tide. This tool also only works on open-ended questions, and so that's really relevant to the ELA CAT test as well as the math performance test, where both of them do have open-ended responses. You will not need this for the science assessments. If you do want to have your students try out this tool, it is also on the interim assessments as well as the practice tests, and we do encourage students to be able to practice it before the actual assessments. We do still support the third-party software, so if your students are very familiar with Dragon speech-to-text, they are still welcome to use that. Next slide. We made an update to the hot text items. In the past, we do get calls saying that, you know, the visibility of the text or the option being selected is not very visible to the student. And if you see it on the right-hand side, you'll see that light green. Some students couldn't see or couldn't get that enough of a contrast to know which text they selected. So we did try and change the color and made it darker so that it was easier and more visible for the student and as well as the teacher if the teacher needed to help the student. So the image on the left is what it will look like now. Next slide. The TA interface, just one update. It's not new. It was built with the remote testing last year, but we are still offering it this year, is scheduling a session in advance. So we had heard from many teachers that this was a very useful tool. It was just one less thing to worry about. They didn't have to schedule the test session the day of. They could schedule in advance, get the session ID and everything like that. So we're still offering this tool. A teacher can schedule a test session in advance up to 2 weeks. So if a teacher or a proctor knows they're going to schedule a test, they can already set it up, generate the session ID, and have it all ready before the day of testing. Next slide. The centralized reporting system, a year and a half ago, we did consolidate all the reporting into one system called CRS. The old system, the online reporting system that many of you are familiar with, has been decommissioned. So if you do need access to interim or summative results now or in the past, they are now all in the CSR reporting system. And just as a reminder, it's been mentioned many times before, if you need any access to any of the resources, go to the portal. If you need to contact someone, please contact our help desk. We have our email and phone number there. No question is too small, so do not hesitate to contact them. If you are new and you want to contact them to say, I'd like to speak to Jen about so-and-so, you can certainly do so as well. I know I've contacted and communicated with a lot of you directly, and we just want to make sure that you have a very successful testing experience. So if there are any questions, please do not hesitate to contact the help desk. And
Thanks.
Abe, I think, yep.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So we're once again at the point where we are can take some questions. And I saw a couple that I'm just going to touch on real quick about. There's a reference to test completion rate percentage for this year. I think that's a reference to the 95, and I know Dee spoke to this. I believe she responded. The waiver is, we don't have a waiver this year, so all those expectations that we have been familiar with the years past, yes, that is back. One of you had a question about being a new coordinator. Just call us. One of us will help you out. I know we don't have like a special package for a new school, like particularly an APSEP, but we know what happens. So call one of us. We'll walk you through it. You can do it. You'll be fine. And then what was the other one? I think for the most part, everybody else has been answered. Yeah, there's a question about a medical issue. Yeah, call us if you need to speak to any of us. There's probably a lot of questions we would ask you about that. Janet or Dee actually would be the best to call about that. One thing, if you're putting any questions of items, I don't see anything else. I want to mention that we had a topic that came up yesterday and the day before that isn't in the deck, is this notion due to circumstances in the schools these days in terms of coverage. Can you have someone non-certified administer the test? The answer is yes. This is the same policy that's been in our office for forever. And so as long as that person is trained and supervised by a certified staff person. So if I am a substitute in the building, it's fine if I administer the test, but I have to be trained and supervised by maybe one of my colleagues, Janet, who is who I report to at the school. So that's fine. And there really isn't we recognize this is going to be an issue this year. Things are not easy. Hopefully the days will get brighter, but right now things are tricky. We understand that. So that you have that in your bag of tricks. Do we have a checklist of, yeah, Karen, there is actually something in the back of the TCM. There are some checklists that might be helpful, I think. I see that. Oh, yeah, I see. Christy dropped the, can't respond quick enough. So feel free to drop any other questions in the chat. You can also use the raise hand feature and we can unmute you and you can ask your question verbally. When you say yeah, you don't literally have to be in the room with that colleague, but if there's an issue, we're going to really be asking the certified staff person, any questions. We're going to be going to them. So no, they don't, a supervised certified staff person could be overseeing, 2 or 3 substitutes, but they ultimately have to report to that certified staff person. So as you're dropping things in or you're thinking about a question, I know our office, I probably speak for all my colleagues, we really appreciate your partnership and working together this year. We understand it's tricky. We're here to support you. Please contact us if you need anything. We all have been in the office for many, many years. It's and we understand that these, this year and last year, it's been unprecedented, even from a testing standpoint. We are here to support you. We understand stuff is going to come up and we will get through this. And, my colleagues all are on the call here would probably say the same. So thank you to everyone here. And thank you to also my colleagues at CSDE and CAI for just doing a bang up job supporting the districts. Thank you. Okay, well, seeing no more questions, I don't want to hold on too long here. There should be an end at some point. So thank you so much. Again, there is a special populations presentation at 12 o'clock today. You can still register. We'd love to see you haven't registered, and please join us and we will see you and have a nice afternoon. Thank you.